This is one part of the city where we know Cleopatra lived. But archaeologists have always assumed that it was lost forever.
The sea levels have changed so much that part of the city, the part that bordered the harbor, is now underwater. It's in an unfortunate location in terms of earthquake and seismic action. So it has suffered from earthquakes and even a report of a tsunami, a kind of tidal wave, in the 4th century AD.
But one man was convinced there were still clues out there waiting to be found. In the early 1990s, marine archaeologist Frank Goddio began diving in the harbour. He was looking for fragments. What he found was a sunken city. He and his team have begun to exhibit some of the many items they brought to the surface. Evidence of a uniquely rich culture.
First, we dove to see if something could be seen, and you could see only sediment, nothing. Everything was buried under the sediment, underwater. Then we had to start doing underwater excavation, and little by little we saw red granite. And it was a block of red granite, and cleaning it, I saw hieroglyph. And this was the first artifact we found in Alexandria Great Harbor. We found thousands and thousands of artifacts, beautiful sculptures. It's a kind of a vision from the past and of everything which was there in the past.
There were ruined buildings, as well as statues honouring various gods and pharaohs. Each object added to an emerging picture of ancient Alexandria. And finally, a breakthrough, a find they could tie directly to Cleopatra.
We found sometimes artifacts related to her. We found, for example, the likeness of the father of Cleopatra.
Did she commission this statue or witness its construction? Another bust has an even stronger personal connection.
We found also a beautiful head of black granite, and it has been identified as Caesarion, the son of Cleopatra and Julius Caesar.
This is a bust of Cleopatra's son Caesarion, fathered by Julius Caesar, then murdered by his successor. It's thought to have stood alongside a statue of Cleopatra herself. It identifies the harbour site where it was found as the location of the Ptolemy's palace. Together, the finds from the underwater excavations provide a tangible link to a time that has passed into legend. They bring us face to face with the city of the real Cleopatra.
In the mind of everybody, there is a merge between Cleopatra and Alexandria. It's a kind of synonym. And Alexandria had a very important role in the development of the Western world and in passing the messages of the antiquity to the new Western world.
The effects of what unfolded here during Cleopatra's reign would be felt around the world. But in those dying days of the Egyptian Empire, Alexandria shone as the greatest city on earth.
The Alexandria of Cleopatra was the be-all and end-all. Some people say it's the New York of the times, the Paris, you pick the capital. It was the place to be. So what you're looking at is this glistening marble metropolis, and Rome living in wooden hovels, a hick town, as opposed to the hip jet-set place to be.
And it was this very prosperity which put not only Alexandria, but the whole of Egypt at risk of invasion. The problem for Cleopatra and the people of Egypt was that they were victims of their own success. Egypt had an apparently inexhaustible source of wealth, bound to make other powers envious. For 3,000 years, the River Nile had nourished Egyptian civilization. Its annual flood brought millions of tons of fertile soil, saturating the plains and creating rich farmlands. Egypt grew grain. The economy grew fat.
The agricultural potential of the country, the ability of its grain resources to feed Rome and the Roman Empire. This is really what set Rome on the course for collision with Cleopatra.
After Cleopatra's death, her country would become Rome's breadbasket, supplying a third of its grain. Now in Alexandria, beneath the city streets, experts have found eyewitness evidence of the chain of events which destroyed both the Queen and her empire. Cleopatra didn't know that she would be the last of the Ptolemies, a dynasty that had ruled in Egypt for 300 years. She'd grown up with a sense of her family's superiority, their greatness, their right to rule. She took the throne aged 18.
How does unbridled wealth and absolute advantage affect anyone? She can be a dominant force, a mistress, if you will, of a nation that spans from Alexandria maybe as far as Rome.
But she immediately faced a crisis that had long been brewing.
The Ptolemies basically sucked Egypt dry. Their total incompetence as rulers, their failure in the military field, their inability to control their courtiers and the priesthood, and their real self-indulgence had basically sunk the dynasty to the lowest depths it had ever been.
This was what Cleopatra inherited, an empire on a collision course with disaster. Her reign began with a power struggle. Her brother seized the throne, and the displaced queen was forced into hiding. At the Anfushi tombs, hidden beneath the modern city, Jean-Yves Empereur finds contemporary evidence of what happened next.
First of all, it's very surprising to find here such fragile drawings made by simple charcoal.
These crude charcoal drawings depict a single event which was to change Cleopatra's entire world. Seeing an opportunity to gain power in a weakened Egypt, Rome sent a fleet of ships to Alexandria. At its head was Julius Caesar.
His troops and the crew of his fleet escaped from the battle and stayed in this kind of shelter.
These graffiti are a 2,000-year-old record of one of the most notorious meetings in ancient history. Caesar's arrival and intervention on Cleopatra's behalf allowed her to take back the throne. He was clearly charmed by her, and once he'd removed her younger brother, they began an affair. For Cleopatra's part, the arrival of the Romans didn't mean a handover of power, so much as an opportunity to return Egypt to greatness. The meeting is usually portrayed as a seduction, but it had vast political significance.
Rome was probably going to be her worst enemy or her best ally. And so when Cleopatra and Caesar actually met, they both were on the same page with regard to what they wanted. They wanted world domination, and they realized that united, they would be able to realize that dream as opposed to being enemies and having to fight each other.
In this version of events, Cleopatra wasn't Caesar's mistress, but his partner. She wasn't surrendering so much as forging an alliance. They had a son, and though he bore his father's name, Caesarion, Cleopatra went to great pains to show he had, through her, the blood of a true pharaoh. Bob Bianchi is examining the evidence of this 500 miles south of Alexandria on the temple walls at Dendera.
The Egyptian evidence does not give us a personal picture of the queen. We do not have hieroglyphs that tell us how she interacted with Caesar. What we do have from the Egyptian evidence is how she is portrayed as a monarch. The Temple of Dendera represents Cleopatra at the height of her power. This is probably the image of Cleopatra anywhere in Egypt, anywhere in the world. Cleopatra as the mother of Caesarion, whom she believes is her rightful heir.
These figures, 20 feet high, convey a message. He may have had a Roman father, but Caesarion was an Egyptian. He was, first and foremost, his mother's heir. Here, Cleopatra was telling the world how she and Egypt had harnessed Rome's power. She used religion to help make her point, appropriating one of the most important Egyptian festivals. She portrayed herself as the goddess Hathor and Caesar as the falcon god Horus. These representations of the two were united in a ceremony that took place along a 90-mile stretch of the Nile.
It revolves around a procession of sacred boats, one stationed here in Dendera. The Dendera boat carries the female goddesses, the boat from Edfu carries the male god Horus.
The male boat would depart for Dendera from the temple at Edfu.
These two temples are a mirror of each other. They're essentially joined.
Andrea Kay explores the Edfu temple. Its construction was only finished during Cleopatra's reign.
Cleopatra made very clear that she was the goddess Hathor. And it was also very widely implied that Caesar was the king Horus. So the statue of the god Horus, representing Caesar in this case, would have been placed in the bark, which is essentially a mobile shrine, carried among the people to the river and transported to Dendera, where Hathor, also Cleopatra, had the female portion.
This was a piece of propaganda as much as a religious ritual. When Caesar and Cleopatra came together, she didn't become Roman. Rather, Caesar took on an Egyptian identity. The fact that he was portrayed as Horus, the pharaoh's own god who united and protected Egypt, is highly significant.
This is Caesarion, Cleopatra's son by Julius Caesar, and he's being shown here as protected by the god Horus, whose temple this is. We see in Dendera how Cleopatra shows herself as Hathor. We see here how Horus may represent Caesar. And now we have Caesarion, who is the divine child of the two gods.
It was Cleopatra who created this statue, and it's possible to deduce what she was thinking. She was literally placing her son under the protection of Caesar, perhaps because she knew that Roman domination of the ancient world was, in the end, inevitable. The woman who commissioned these monuments is a far more complicated character than the seductress of legend. This is Cleopatra as politician, propagandist, and leader. A position of weakness may have forced her into alliance with Rome, but she used it, taking what she wanted from it and selling it back to the people of Egypt as a victory. Cleopatra clearly wanted to portray herself as a great pharaoh. But this leaves Egyptologists with a puzzle. Robert Bianchi is near Luxor, site of one of the ancient world's largest religious complexes, Karnak. The pharaohs were building monuments here for 2,000 years before Cleopatra.
And every major pharaoh of Egypt, Tutankhamun, Ramses, Amenhotep, all left their name here, including the Ptolemies. So we've got almost a 2,000-year span of history here.
It was almost obligatory for a pharaoh to build a monument here and leave his mark. So where is Cleopatra's?
We would expect that a strong nationalistic queen like Cleopatra herself would have done something to leave her mark here.
It seems unlikely she simply neglected to do what others had done. Perhaps Cleopatra did leave something here, but the people who came after her sought to obliterate any trace of her. Bob Bianchi is convinced